Now, the mainstream media, of course, are not helping this at all. The mainstream media are not reporting on any relevant data when it comes to this virus. The mainstream media are not doing anything to quell people's fears. Actually, what they're doing, because they're too childish and partisan to even report on the virus itself, they are instead focusing on an aspect of Chinese propaganda and parroting that. The Chinese government is now saying it's racist to call the virus Chinese. I wonder why they're saying that. We talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday. Of course, China doesn't want any blame, and they know that leftists in America will carry their water for them. So now the media are parroting this line. They're completely failing to do their job during this pandemic. So they're asking, is it racist to point out that the virus is Chinese? I won't get into too many examples of this. We did it yesterday. John Nolte on Breitbart has listed 53 examples of the mainstream media calling the virus the Chinese coronavirus or the Wuhan virus before they decided to be parrots for Chinese propaganda and say that that's racist. Go check that out. It's really, really funny. The reason I bring it up is over the last day, President Trump has now addressed this charge himself, and we are seeing peak Trump. Grade A, this is why we elected you, Trump. He is asked by some reporter I've never heard of if it is racist to refer to the Chinese origins of this virus. Trump does not give an inch.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. Comes from China. I want to be accurate. Yeah, please, John. Please. I have great love for all of the people from our country. But as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen. Not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
Great answer. Two big problems with that reporter's question. First of all, she says viruses don't have an ethnicity. That's true, but they do have a nationality. Viruses do come from places, and the Chinese coronavirus came from China, just like the West Nile virus came from the West Nile, just like Ebola comes from the Ebola River, just like the Spanish flu came through Spain. It actually didn't come from Spain, but Spain gave it its popular character. So they do have nationalities. This one has exclusively, it's not even like the Spanish flu where you say, well, it started here and then it went here and then it became really a big problem here. This virus just comes from China. It became a big problem in China. The whole reason that we're dealing with it is because China didn't deal with it. It's a Chinese virus. That's the first problem with her question. The second problem with her question is how offensive it is to Americans, because her premise is that if you refer to this as the Chinese virus, then Americans are just going to start beating Chinese people in the street. That's what she said. She said, there are already examples of hostility toward Chinese people. Why would you make it worse by calling it a Chinese virus? As though Americans are just waiting. We are seething with bigotry and hatred. Give me any excuse to just become violent against people of other races. Oh, President, please tell us where the virus comes from so we can just become beasts and start beating people over the head. Are you kidding me? What do you think of your countrymen? We are the least bigoted, most open and tolerant society ever in the whole history of the world. And this reporter looks at her countrymen and says, oh my gosh, they're all animals. They're bigots. They're beasts. That they're also idiots and they don't realize the virus comes from China. So if you tell these dumb, violent rubes where the virus comes from, they're going to start clubbing people over the head. You know, I think that if you took the average American, it would probably be much more polite and have a much better view of the world and probably have much better manners than most DC reporters, okay? If we're trying to compare people here. So that was that lady. I don't know who that was. Then another lady, another reporter, asks President Trump a more hilarious version of the same question. She asks if it's racist to call the virus Kung Flu.
There are some, at least one White House official, who used the term Kung flu, referring to the fact that this virus started in China. Is that acceptable? Is it wrong? Are you worried that having this virus be talked about as a Chinese virus, that might
I wonder who said that. You know who said that?
I'm not sure the person's name, but would you condemn the fact
say the term again?
A person at the White House used the term Kung flu. My question is, do you think that's wrong? Kung flu. And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target that?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China. There's nothing not to agree. Okay, how about the last question?
Oh, here he is. Here is Trump doing the thing he does best, which is he just plays with those mainstream media reporters like a little marionette on strings. So she says, somebody, some unnamed person in your administration called the virus Kung flu. Heaven forfend, grab my pearls. Made a pretty funny pun about the virus. Oh no, it's the end of the world. It's pretty much David Duke, isn't it? It's like Richard Spencer's working for you because they made a pun or something. And so Trump, he's really good. He doesn't laugh out loud. He keeps the straight face. He goes, who said this? And she goes, well, I don't know. So it highlights, first of all, that these people don't have good information anyway. They're just passing along innuendo and insinuation. They're not even going to say it was that person, it was that staffer. So he goes, okay, all right. They move on past that one. He goes, and what did they call it? As if President Trump hadn't heard it the first time. And he does it with a perfectly straight face. What did they call it? And she starts to repeat her question. He goes, no, just say the term. No, you say the term. Kung flu. Yeah, Kung flu? Yes, Kung flu. So he gets this mainstream media reporter to utter the phrase Kung flu to the president on national television multiple times. And then once he's gotten her to say it enough times, Kung flu. And you can't keep up the mainstream narrative when you actually hear this. Because what the mainstream narrative is, the White House staffers are using racial insults and attacking their fellow countrymen who are Asian, and it's bigoted and it's awful and might as well be the N-word, right? And that's kind of the insinuation there. But then the reality of it is, it's Kung flu. It's just funny. It's just a funny term to refer to this Chinese coronavirus. And so he gets her to say it, and then anybody who's watching it just thinks, okay, what are we angry about now? What are we supposed to... They wouldn't even be able to be angry because they would be too busy laughing. And I think President Trump certainly was laughing on the inside during that and probably laughed about it a little bit afterward. Not to put too fine a point on it, it is obviously not racist to talk about where the viruses come from. This is 100% the fault of the Chinese government. We will explain exactly how and exactly how much better our lives would be, how much lower the death rate would be, how much lower the hospitalization rate would be, how much better our economy would be doing if China had just dealt with this in the first place. If you enjoyed that video, and let's be honest, of course you did. I hope you did. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so everyone wading through the wasteland of YouTube knows that we have the best content out there.